What's up, guys? Voice of Flex back again. I know it's been a while, and I know every time I, go through a phase of making content and then stopping, and the cycle repeats itself. However, I am going to try and be more consistent now because I realize that we are in a very pivotal time in our country, in history, in geopolitics, and it's necessary now. And so even though my life has taken on a lot more responsibility, I am back in school learning cybersecurity, which I recommend anyone that as you progress in life and as you grow older and there's things that you want to do to make more money and stuff, invest in yourself. And also, I'm back fully operating my business from a different angle. I still realize that this is an important thing that I have to focus on and important to try and at least spread the word because I don't want to be just another channel and just another random opinion. I want to try and help facilitate the message. And so even though I do reactionary content on this channel, I'm still going to try and put my own insight because I am pretty well versed in a lot of this stuff, or a lot of this stuff that I do talk about. And I also think it's important that for every thing that I'm reacting to or for every video I might make about a certain topic, there might be a person that finds me but doesn't find any of the other, channels or information. So, with all that to say, I'm glad to be back. I've been talking about this for a while. This is a new webcam. I don't know if you can tell based on the resolution and the quality, but I had a 720 webcam. I have a 1080p webcam now that has zoom in, zoom out features, tilt features, whatever. So it kind of happened ironically because my webcam just shit the bed the other day, and I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, but you know what? Between my stream that I do for gaming and stuff, and with class, because I take an online class, at least for now, and just knowing that I wanted to get back into doing this content, I was like, I guess it was meant to be. So, without further ado, I'm sure you guys know Charlie Kirk was assassinated last week, or I think it's been about a week and a half at this point now, close to 2 weeks. So rest in peace to Charlie Kirk. Obviously, there's some discrepancies as to some of the messages that I agree with and don't agree with, specifically on Israel. But in general, his message was extremely positive for the youth. He helped convert a lot of people to the conservative side, the Republican side, and he also helped convert a lot of young people to Christianity and faith. And I think there's something that has to be said about that. You can't take that away from, from the fight that we're doing on a daily against, all of these battles. And at the end of the day, it's a spiritual battle. And I think that, which I'll talk about this in future videos, but there's a possibility of the Israel angle. However, regardless, his message is now going to be perpetuated at a much higher degree, and I think that in general he was just a massive voice for the Republican side. And the overarching issue is that it was all on the basis of discourse, open debate. Change my mind, prove me wrong. If you disagree with me, let's have a conversation. But instead they killed him. And again, there's all of the conspiracies and all of the misguiding evidence and stuff like that, which we'll get to. I think I'm going to make like a little mini series about that for anybody that sees this or that currently follows me and stuff that is also aware of that topic. But in general, for now, I just think it's important that I jump back into the space and hopefully catch some of the momentum that I had before, because I realize a lot of y'all commented, watched, subscribed, and then even on the TikTok channel I made, which probably would have got banned soon, but a lot of people were on there too, and within a matter of months, I had thousands of views, hundreds of subscribers, and I just completely shit the bed on continuing that momentum and that wave. So either way, for now, we're gonna react to this Nick Fuentes clip. I watch Nick Fuentes a lot. Myron, the debrief, Sneeko, uh, Ian Carroll, Dave Smith, fucking, Candace Owens. Like, I watch everything. I also watch a lot of things on the left as well. I watch a lot of CNN, MSNBC, and just left wing commentators, Hassan, whatever, Kyle Kalinske or whatever the fuck his name is. But all that to say, I think it's important to get both sides, and I think it's important to also understand the gravity of the things that are happening in this world. And so that's the reason why I was like, okay, one, I've been wanting to do it again because I did have so much momentum. Two, because I think I can also give a perspective that is unbiased, even though I tend to lean more on one side. And three, I think it's just important that the more people we have fighting this, narrative in a general sense, or fighting the silence or the misconstrued information, there's a possibility that in the future we can make a difference. And so, yeah. So all that to say, I think I'm going to make a little series on Charlie Kirk's assassination, and as far as my thoughts on him, my thoughts on how it happened, what happened, and, so on and so forth. For now, Nick did a stream the other day discussing the TikTok buyout that is currently being facilitated within the government and within the private sector of our country because of the things that happened in a couple of years, or I guess not a couple of years, it's only been a year now, but they tried to get it banned. Trump reinstated it because he understands that it helped him become president again. And we all know why it's being silenced, because of the Israel angle and a lot of things, and kids, the younger generation waking up. So he's going to talk about this. It's a 42-minute video, or almost 42-minute video. So we probably will do just like a quick reaction, or we'll do like a two-part, because I think what he's talking about, I've seen the stream already, but I think what he discusses in this is extremely important. So I didn't pull up the actual stream of this whole thing. I just pulled up the video that I guess a clipper made or whatever. So without further ado, glad to be back. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Sorry for the droned on open monologue, but I just figured it was necessary considering all the things that have transpired in the last few months, specifically the last couple weeks, and also because I haven't made a video in fucking like a year or something now. So yeah, let's get into it.
Our featured story, we're talking all about the acquisition of TikTok by a consortium of U.S. companies. And for those that don't know, this has been a very long-term conversation. And let's talk briefly about the background.
And yes, I vape. I've vaped on and off for years. I did smoke cigs when I was younger, but quit that like within a couple of years. But I've vaped on and off for years. I go through phases, but I've been kind of trying to, wean off of it again. However, I do vape, and so judge me if you want. Is what it is. So yeah.
TikTok. The reason that it is the subject of so much scrutiny and so much attention from policymakers, there's one simple reason, and that is that it is a damn good platform. That's the only reason why.
Facts.
TikTok, at its apogee around 2019, 2020, was at one point the fastest growing social platform in history. The fastest to reach 1 billion users, growing and far surpassing the growth rate of Instagram and every other U.S.-owned social
media.
platform.
Yep. So, also, two things. One, he's 100% correct. Two, for anyone that might not like Nick Fuentes, if you've watched my content, you probably, in the past, you probably do know about him, or do maybe watch him or like him. But either way, even if you don't, speaks a lot of truth, and I watch him a lot, and he's always has spoken truth. So be mad if you want, but again, I'm sure if you've watched my content, even though before it was kind of more like very moderate, conservative takes, I've gotten to a little bit of the deep stuff, but now, again, like I said previously, extremely well versed in a lot of this stuff, and I try and stay up to date on everything. I know the history, and yeah. So with all, again, just to preface that with us reacting to his clip, and again, specifically what he's talking about here is extremely important for the future of our country and for the world.
The reason it's under scrutiny is because it is the best product. The TikTok algorithm, but also I believe the freedom on TikTok is why it was so successful. It was simply better. It is better than Instagram. It is better than YouTube. It is better than Snapchat. All US owned social platforms. And that is why it exploded in growth. Now, the secret sauce of TikTok, everybody knows, is its algorithm.
Yep.
And when we say the algorithm, what do we mean? We mean its ability, using software, to connect users with interesting and funny
things that they'll gravitate to, right?
And there's some factors that make the algorithm effective. It rewards first-time content creators.
That's true.
So if you make a channel on TikTok,
if you like make if it's your first account and you make a video that is extremely ambiguous, it could easily blow up, which is extremely rare because every other platform is not like that. And their algorithm, like he mentioned, is, and I'm sure a lot of people know this, it's extremely well designed to put your algorithm to create it in a sense that it's going to keep you scrolling. It's going to keep you focused because it's all things that you want to see. And you might have the random thing that's kind of like, I don't really care for this, but it does that because it also will then still keep you enticed. It'll make you want to think and be like, I don't really like this, so I'll scroll again, or I'll watch this because I want to see the bullshit that they're about to say, whatever the topic is or whatever the video is or whatever. But it's definitely the platform that completely it amalgamated interest and dialogue. Because I don't know about y'all, but looking at the comments on TikTok is hilarious.
When you post your first TikTok, there is a much higher likelihood as a new creator or a first-time creator that your video will be shown to a larger audience than any other platform. Every other platform like Instagram, like YouTube, who does it reward? It rewards channels with huge
big followings,
bases.
right?
Obviously. Who gets the most views? Who gets the most traction? Who gets rewarded? It is the channels with millions of followers on Instagram and on YouTube. So there's this huge bias, and the platforms have a relationship with those big creators. The platforms help those larger creators get access to the user base, and those larger creators, they stay generating on a full-time basis high production quality, high value content for the platform that keeps users engaged. And that was the mindset of these platforms. That was kind of the unspoken relationship between the biggest creators and the platforms. And there was, up until TikTok came around, kind of this unknown bias, this unknown quid pro quo going on, if you could call it that. But TikTok turned that upside down and put it on its head. What TikTok does instead is if you make a video, you get a much higher chance, whether you have followers or not, that video will go on a stranger's timeline.
Right. They're for
so
you.
I could have 0 followers. If I make a TikTok, it'll be shown to a dozen people. And if they engage with it, it'll
continue to right.
And so on. And what this does on TikTok is it incentivizes people to make content. There's more creators as opposed to passive consumers because there's an incentive. It's easier. And it makes it more competitive then by definition. So those bigger creators, they're competing with small creators too for market share, for space on that For You page. And what this does is it makes the platform more dynamic. If it's more competitive, if there's more creators as opposed to passive users, maybe there's a higher ratio, then you're gonna get a higher chance that someone is gonna pop off for being funny, for being creative, for being good looking, whatever. And their algorithm is designed, maybe more so than any other platform, to simply deliver the best content, no matter who it comes from, to the user, and tailoring that content to that user. So this is why TikTok ultimately is receiving so much scrutiny, because it is simply better. But there's another reason. There's a couple of reasons.
There we go.
The other problem with TikTok is that, and I think people maybe have noticed this, although I'm not sure how
Also, real quick too, I'm not going to drone on about this either, but I have moved since making content before. Have a house now. No, I didn't buy it. I'm still a renter. However, much better house. Maybe I'll do a house tour. But my room is much bigger. I'm going to add some more things to my setup in general. I've been here for a few months now, but I'm definitely liking it. So if you notice that the background is different, or the camera is focusing on a different, setting, that's why. So
how many people have noticed this. At a time when censorship in America was so pervasive, after Trump's election in 2016, in 2017, 2018, 2019, the censorship noose was constantly tightening. There were waves of purges on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube.
Yep.
And the type of censorship was always progressing. It started with violent content like ISIS and mass shooters. Then it turned into hate speech. Then it turned into strict editorial ideological censorship.
Yep.
They said, if you're a white nationalist, if you're a sexist, if you're a racist,
it was based on your opinions.
if you don't believe that the election was free and fair in 2020, then you lose your account. At a time when the American social platforms were becoming more censorious, TikTok had breakout creators like Andrew Tate, maybe most famously.
Yep.
People could actually be edgy on the platform. And this is sort of a foregone conclusion here, but Andrew Tate blew up on TikTok in 2019. Think about that. When Gavin McInnes, when Sam Hyde, when Richard Spencer, when TRS for that matter, when Nick Fuentes, when all the edgy content was banned in America and went underground, Andrew Tate was the most Googled man in the world. How did that happen? It happened quickly, rapidly. It happened on TikTok in the span of 2 months.
Yep.
And look at everything that's happened since. The lawfare against him, the propaganda, like this series on Netflix that just won a bunch
Adolescence
of
or whatever,
creators like Andrew Tate. There was the rapid growth of creators like him, and that was enabled because TikTok is not headquartered in America.
Right.
And as such, it is not subject to the same advocacy group pressure. And this tells you something a little bit about how censorship works. Think about it. Why is it? Because maybe this is a foregone conclusion, but think about how this works. Why? Why were YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter censoring when TikTok was not? Did they not get the memo? Why were all the American social platforms...
Before he continues on this, again, I would hope that the people watching this know why, but ultimately it's because the regulatory agencies that we have here in America that kind of monitor the censorship and the content being released on our platforms owned here, they try and divert the narrative. They try and censor any alternative narratives, and so they didn't like TikTok because people were able to find out truth about certain conspiracy theories, certain narratives about prior, um, you know, like prior history, what happened in that history, the discussions that people were having amongst those narratives, like all these things kind of contributed to them wanting TikTok banned, because they understood that if people found out the truth about a lot of the things that they were lying about or that they were trying to divert people from, it would cause the younger generation to now not like the one country in particular and the one, ethnic group in particular or religion, and also would allow them to, because you got to think that the younger people are our future: doctors, lawyers, politicians, thinkers, philosophers. So they understood that if people don't follow the narrative that we want them to create, then as we go down the generations and as they become leaders in, XYZ, it'll create a problem for us down the line, and we have to still try to control the narrative. And they realized that TikTok was kind of going against the narrative in a way that it was allowing people to actually just say what they thought, say what they found, say what they saw. And that was very dangerous when you're a government trying to control a group of people.
Cracking down in unison progressively, but TikTok seemed to be, for a time, very free and very open and very fair. Or more so. The discrepancy is that TikTok was headquartered in China, and all those other platforms are in America. And you might not know the difference. Maybe you didn't even know that at that time. But the difference is that in America, all these social platforms rely on what? How do they monetize? How do they make money? Do you know?
Advertisement.
How does Facebook make money? How does Snapchat make money? How does Instagram, YouTube make money? 95% of Facebook's revenue comes from advertisements. Same with YouTube, same with Snapchat. To the extent they can monetize, it's advertisers. And who controls the advertisers in America? We know. When Elon Musk acquired Twitter, how did advocacy groups in America try to push back on some of the content that began to proliferate because of the liberalization of speech on the platform? They went after the advertisers.
Yep.
When Mark Zuckerberg in 2020 refused to take down a post from the president, Donald Trump, about BLM, how did advocacy groups push back? They organized an advertiser boycott. And who organized those boycotts? The ADL.
Yep.
The ADL organized
And for y'all that don't know, the ADL is the Anti-Defamation League, run by Jonathan Greenblatt is his name, if I'm not mistaken. But it's pretty much it's a regulatory agency that oversees kind of media, content, social media, public venues, like all these kinds of things. And most advertisers, companies kind of have to filter through them in order to be able to advertise on their videos. So if they deem a person, a platform, a message unadvertisable, for whatever the case may be, usually anti-Semitism, then those advertisers are not allowed, not necessarily not allowed, but they choose not to advertise on those platforms, or the platform chooses not to let people advertise on their platform or that person, because then they will continue down that line, that funnel of, oh, well, you chose to still work with that person, so you're also excommunicated, per se. So since they regulate that, and the advertisers, kind of go based off of their general rules and what they say and spew, as they deem somebody unadvertisable, or like I said, or a platform, it makes it hard for that company or that person or whatever the case may be. It makes it hard for that thing to make money. And so, but again, a lot of the time the basis is based off of anti-Semitism, racism, but yeah.
Advertiser boycotts. They threaten to make American social platforms not profitable. Or, in the event that they're not profitable to begin with, they threaten to destroy the revenue base.
Right.
By organizing the advertisers, the source of all the revenue, and getting them to stop based on political reasons. They couldn't do that with TikTok because TikTok wasn't running that same kind of model.
Right. It was based in China.
TikTok was running a different model. They had their creators selling products from China.
Right. With the TikTok shop.
They had their creators selling items from the TikTok shop.
Yep.
They had other advertisers, you don't see an advertisement for Ford and Chevy and Monsanto or, Slavery Incorporated. You don't see ads like that on TikTok. Although increasingly you do in the past few years. Initially, they didn't monetize as much. They had other revenue, and then a lot of their revenue came from the shop. But it's also the stakeholders. Who owns the American platforms here? Who has the largest stake or share?
It's all firms,
in
BlackRock,
Meta,
Vanguard.
Companies. It is the major asset managers like Vanguard, like BlackRock.
Yep.
These are companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And they have to apply by all the political rules that all the other publicly traded companies do. Not the case with ByteDance in China.
Right.
So you think, why was TikTok so effective? Why was it such a good product? Well, there's technological reasons, but there's also political reasons too. Now, of course, TikTok being headquartered in China is another reason. It's not just the size of it, but also it being headquartered in China, which is why there was scrutiny from American policymakers. They said that because TikTok is headquartered in China, that Beijing would have access to all the American user data.
Right.
And that is a legitimate national security problem.
It's
because these
compromisable.
applications, they do take a lot of your data. They take your device data, they take data from your camera and from your microphone, they take it from other applications, geolocation. It is a legitimate problem. And to the extent that we have an American intelligence community, that is one of their legitimate interests, is protecting American data from foreign countries. And so this was an issue that was flagged around 2019 and 2020. It was 5 years ago that this originally became a subject of debate in Washington.
Just changed the quality.
And the Trump
Should have
administration,
did that earlier,
the first
but
one, banned TikTok on government devices. And they attempted to broker a deal to get TikTok sold to an American company.
right.
Ultimately, that never happened. And what they settled on was to transfer American user data to an American company called Oracle.
Okay, so here's where things get kind of where like they not cynical, but they kind of start going down a bad hole, because what he's describing, I'm sure we all remember when what the fuck was that dude's name? Anyway, he was the CEO of TikTok, and he did the congressional hearing a couple years ago, and it was because of this exact reason that he's describing. Now, part of it was the data that was being, TikTok requires a lot of data. Their terms of service agreements are very nuanced, but they also are thorough in the sense that they do collect a lot of information outside of the app itself. So besides the things you input for your account, they also, like he said, they get it from the location on your phone. They listen to the microphone on your phone. They look at the camera on your phone. And so that's why a lot of times when you talk about something, next thing you know, you scroll TikTok and you have an ad for it. Perfect example, the other day I was streaming and a buddy of mine told me about a game that was coming out. And I'm on stream talking to him about the game coming out in the coming days. And then I still to this day get ads for that game. And so they're listening, they're watching, they're collecting data constantly. And so because of that, that was an angle that they were trying to use as to why they don't want all the data held in China, or why they don't want a Chinese company being the primary holder. However, the other aspect is what he's going to go into here. And at the end of that, if you called it, he said Oracle. Oracle's owned by Larry Ellison, who is a Jewish billionaire. Um, and at one point was actually richer than Elon Musk in the recent past. But um, Oracle is already a company that collects a lot of data and that Israel uses to find out a lot of things about public sentiment, all these things. So I'll let him go on, but this is the primary reason why this transition is about to happen and why they were really upset about it being owned by China.
And so the ownership of TikTok would not be transferred from China to America, but American user data would be transferred from Chinese data centers to American owned data centers owned by Oracle, one of our Silicon Valley companies owned by Larry Ellison. Now, for 4 years, they tabled that issue. That was shelved. A lot of people don't know that. Some people remember, but that original push to ban TikTok happened 5 years ago. And a lot of people forget that it was resolved. Many people don't even know that it was resolved. All those cybersecurity concerns, that happened half a decade ago, and they reached a resolution. Many people don't even know that Oracle hosts American user data in American-owned data centers. That cybersecurity thing is basically a moot point. When did banning TikTok all of a sudden became an issue again? Last year. When last year? Shortly after October 7th in Israel.
Yep.
After the October 7th attacks in the end of 2023, 2 years ago, everybody was obviously talking about it on social media.
Yep.
Everybody rushed to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube to give their take on the October 7th attack and then the ensuing Israeli counteroffensive.
Right. And so, see, now this is why it's important, because prior to October 7th, discussing these topics, talking about the Israeli influence in our government, talking about the Jewish influence in business and entertainment and social media, all these things, it was usually you would just get banned, silenced, etc. But also the other thing was it was kind of shamed or looked down upon. Whereas after October 7th and the information on TikTok exploded as to what actually happened on October 7th versus the narrative they were telling, the history of Palestine and Israel, the history of the conflict, and just the history of both nation states in general. Once that started to explode, that's when they said, oh shit, like we need to do something about this. And also within all of that information, they also Osama's letter to America blew up on TikTok. The history of 9/11, like all these things started to blow up. And so once that happened, these regulatory agencies, the ADL, along with others, started to say, okay, well, if people are learning about this at a young age and they're starting to question it, we already have an influence of Nick Fuentes, Myron Gaines, Sneeko, Ian Carroll, Candace Owens, Jake Shields, like all these, Dan Bilzerian, all these influencers that are already, have an audience and already telling the truth about what's going on in that conflict, not only in modernity but also in history. If we also have just random people in the younger generation that are starting to open their eyes to this just because of stuff they see on TikTok, this is going to be really bad as things start to go on, as the generations start to continue, as those younger generation like the Gen Z people start to grow up, like we're gonna have an issue as to our support for Israel, as to our manipulation within their media and their government. So we have to do something about this.
Did not be.
Also, real quick, so we've been 35 minutes now on this video. There'll definitely be a part 2, and like I said, I'll also do a mini series on the Charlie Kirk assassination. I realized that the first 5 to 10 minutes of this video was me discussing me coming back. So the second part will hopefully be the same length, if not less, but that'll take out some of the time. However, just wanted to say that because I don't want to just make a hour-long video for no reason. So we'll go ahead and cut this off here in a few minutes, and then we'll do a second part to this, because the rest, as he's going down this line right now, this is when things get important. And then, like I said, I think I'm going to do a mini-series of the Charlie Kirk assassination, talking about the public narrative and some of the, theories and random, tinfoil hat shit.
Again, really until November. Israel started the blockade right away. The airstrikes came later. The invasion came around the beginning of November of 2023. By the end of November, they reached a 1 to 2 week ceasefire.
Yep.
And then it began all over again in December. And it was roughly around December 2023. Pay attention to the timeline. It was roughly around December 2023 that we started to get analytics about how people were talking about the war in Gaza.
Yep.
And the trend, the analytics could not be more striking. On every American platform, the pro-Israel content was by far and away more popular, more frequent, the hashtags more used than all of the pro-Palestine content. If you looked at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, it was like 90-10 in terms of pro-Israel hashtags, pro-Israel sentiment
versus pro-Palestine
sentiment. It wasn't even close.
And the funny thing about this is that part of this is not only because of the younger generation waking up to the narratives, waking up to the history, waking up to the lies, but it's also because there's that side where it's higher IQ, we understand what's going on, and we understand how we got here, but then there's the other side of it that is just the sheeple, as you would say, that kind of just, they see a video on TikTok or they see a random documentary and they just go along with it. And so this issue with the Israel-Palestine conflict that's been happening since October 7th, 2023, is the first issue where a majority of the left and a majority of the right have kind of aligned on and agreed on. It's like the first bigger issue in years, decades maybe, that we've aligned on. And so I would argue the ones on the right that understand it is because we actually understand what's going on and we have more of a knowledge of the history because of the information and the research we're doing. But on the left, it's strictly not strictly, but mostly a humanitarian issue as to like, okay, y'all are committing genocide. Like, this is not right. But irregardless of that fact, it still is something that a majority of people are starting to align on no matter what side they're on. And so once that started happening, it was like, it doesn't matter, right, left, middle, whatever. This is something we all agree is wrong.
But on TikTok, that trend was inverted. It was completely reversed. On TikTok, the pro-Palestine hashtags, content, sentiment, dominated the For You page, dominated the platform. By December 2023, the ADL and all the other Jewish groups started to raise awareness about this. They compiled the data, they published the data, and they started to raise the alarm and say that this is an anti-Semitism problem. They said that The American social platforms, which are moderated by ADL approved moderators, have ADL suggested enforcement policies, are under the political control of the ADL. They all have pro-Israel content, defending Israel, supporting the offensive. They said, but Chinese-owned TikTok, that is not subject to the same pressures.
Right.
They said that has become a breeding ground for vile anti-Semitism expressed as pro-Palestine sentiment.
Which, real quick, again, we're going to cut this off here soon because now he's about to get into the meat and potatoes, and I'd rather that be its own video, and this has been 40 minutes now already. But also, the bigger picture here, too, is that, or one of the ironic things I find about this whole anti-Semitism word is that Semitic people, or, you know, Semitism in general, the definition is people from that region of the world. The people that live in and reside in Israel are from Eastern Europe. They're Ashkenazi Jews. They're not Semitic people. They are Jewish, but they are not Semitic. So it's funny that they just completely robbed that term and manipulated it to where, oh, if you hate Jews, you're anti-Semitic. Cool. But then they also say if you question or if you start to, you know, wonder why things are going on or how we got here, then you're anti-Semitic. It's like, no, if I'm criticizing, that's not anti-Semitic. But that's what they do because it allows them to silence you. And I just thought that was always a really funny, like, ironic point. But anyway, so again, he's about to get into the meat and potatoes, so we're going to wrap it up here in a second. But I just thought that was always really funny because technically, if you're like, they're not Semitic people, and also the people that they are committing genocide on are actually Semitic people.
And so during the Republican primary debates in 2023 and 2024, Nikki Haley, backed by Miriam Adelson, said, she even quoted one of these reports. She said it was an issue of the presidential election that if you spend time on TikTok, you are becoming more anti-Semitic. And all of the 50-plus Jewish organizations in America began to lobby that the United States government ban TikTok.
Yep.
They said TikTok is allowing anti-Semitism to swell. That is why the government must take over or ban TikTok. And wouldn't you know, what is that timeline? In January 2024, you get a bill in Congress to ban TikTok. By April, it passes. By April 2024, it passes a divided government. A Republican House, a Democrat Senate. They couldn't fund the government in 2024. They couldn't fund a border wall. They couldn't fund even the foreign aid up to that point.
But they can fund, yep.
And do you know which groups took a victory lap after they banned TikTok?
Republicans.
The North American Jewish Federation.
Oh, never mind.
The North American Jewish Federation, which speaks on behalf of and works in coordination with over 50 North American Jewish organizations. Why? They could not be more explicit in their letter. They said because of anti-Semitism on the platform. Now, nominally, the U.S. government and the Republicans and the Democrats and Fox News said it was about cybersecurity concerns. They said it was about China.
Right. It's the narrative that they can use to facilitate doing what they're doing.
It was never about China. If it was, we resolved that 5 years ago.
Right.
It might have been about China at one point
to
in
a
time.
degree, yeah.
Maybe there was an argument to be made in 2019 or 2020 that this was a Trojan horse for China to take American user data and propagandize young Americans. Maybe you had an argument at one point. You don't have that argument after the data was transferred to American data centers. October 7th happens, Israel invades, they take the analytics, and immediately you get a bill in Congress and they ban it. And it is widely believed that it was under pressure from Jewish advocacy organizations that they voted to ban TikTok.
All right, we're gonna end it there. Another point that I wanted to make is that because he made the point that that bill was, majority Democrat and Republican. It's funny because when you look at the statistics, I think it's 94% of Congress as a whole, House and Senate, are funded by Jewish lobbies to some degree. So it's like no matter which side it's on, either way, they're going to agree with it. But again, I think we're going to end it right there because, like I mentioned before, he is going to start getting into the meat and potatoes. But he makes a lot of good points. Years ago, it was they lobbied to have it banned because of the information being stored in China. Now they have a source here, Oracle, under Larry Ellison, to hold that data as well, or to at least receive it. And it was kind of just swept under the rug. And then next thing you know, once that narrative happens and people actually are allowed to speak more freely about the history, the conflict, and what's going on over there, the atrocities that they are facing in Palestine, and just kind of the terroristic actions of Israel. Once that happens on October 7th, and they start to kind of free the reins a little bit on censorship and on this narrative that people can talk more freely about, boom, now it's a problem again. So we're going to get more deep into it, but I just wanted to make sure that I didn't make this video extremely too long because it's already almost 50 minutes now here. So again, glad to be back, guys. Hope you enjoyed this one, and hope you're glad that I'm back as well. And we're going to react to the second half of this because there's a lot of things that he gets into here that are extremely important. And make sure you go check him out. He's only on Rumble, if I'm not mistaken. You see right there, rumble.com/NickJFuentes. And also, like I said, I've been watching a lot of the things on Charlie Kirk, so I think I'm going to do a little mini series on that as well. But in general, we'll get the second part, or y'all will get the second part of this. Tomorrow I have class, but over the next 24 to 48 hours, and we'll get into the Charlie Kirk stuff. We'll also get into some other things as far as just the conflicts in the Middle East as a whole over the last 6 months to a year. And yeah, make sure to like, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you disagree? Do you agree? And guess we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.